So today we're diving into something really special. We're not just looking at a historical figure, but at a book. A book that tried to do the impossible, to capture in words a life that was lived almost entirely beyond them. This is it, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And, it's not some formal scripture. It's way more intimate than that. Think of it like a diary, a super meticulous, almost word-for-word record of the conversations of a 19th century mystic. It was all captured by his disciple, a man who just called himself M. It's this incredible moment-by-moment peek into a mind that was just, operating on a completely different frequency. And get this, the great writer Aldous Huxley actually wrote the foreword for the English translation, and his words are just striking. He compared the recorder M to Boswell, who was this famous biographer, but he said Ramakrishna's chronicler was in a league of his own. That comparison just elevates this book beyond a religious text. It frames it as this unique literary and psychological document. Okay, so to really get a handle on this man, we have to understand his world, right? Because Ramakrishna's journey, it didn't just happen in a vacuum. He was born into 19th century Bengal, which was a place of immense cultural and spiritual turmoil. So picture this. On one side, you have thousands of years of Hindu tradition, all focused on God realization, that direct personal experience of the divine. On the other side, the British Empire brings in this tidal wave of new ideas, secular education, materialism, and a kind of modern science that often just dismissed faith altogether. For a lot of educated Indians, this created a massive crisis of faith. And right into the middle of all this steps a young boy named Gadadhar, who we would later know as Ramakrishna. From the very beginning, he chose a path that completely baffled, pretty much everyone. I mean, when his older brother tried to push him towards a formal, breadwinning education in Calcutta, he shot it down with these words. He just wasn't interested in a career or making money. His quest for a deeper spiritual wisdom was absolute, even as a young kid. So eventually, he finds his way to this newly built temple complex at Dakshineshwar, right outside Calcutta. And after a bit of convincing, he takes on the role of priest to the main deity, the Divine Mother, Kali, a really powerful goddess who represents everything from destruction to creation, time, and eternity. But here is the thing. His role as a priest, it was anything but conventional. His approach to worship was raw, intensely personal, and for the people watching, it was deeply unsettling. He would just spend hours singing these devotional songs, and a lot of the time, he'd forget the formal rituals completely. He'd weep uncontrollably, crying out for a direct vision of God. He would literally talk to the stone statue, joke with it, even offer it food from the plate with his own hands, because he was completely convinced he was feeding the living Divine Mother. This intense yearning pushed him right to the edge of human experience. He was consumed by this all-encompassing spiritual agony that looked a lot like madness, and it was all driven by one single desire: to see God directly, not just through faith. And that's the question everyone was asking, Ramakrishna himself included. The temple officials, they thought he was insane. His relatives brought in doctors. He'd stopped eating, sleeping. He had no awareness of the outside world. He was just lost in this divine delirium. And in his own words, the spiritual pain was just unbearable. He described it as this great restlessness, a feeling like his heart was being squeezed dry. That feeling of separation from God was a physical torment, and he felt like his life just wasn't worth living anymore if he couldn't get that direct vision. This agony, it just reached a breaking point. One day, totally convinced he would never achieve his goal, his eyes landed on the ritual sword that was kept in the temple. And in a moment of just absolute desperation, he ran to grab it, determined to end his life right then and there. But in that exact instant, as his hand was closing on the sword, his reality just shattered. The temple, the statues, everything just dissolved. And in its place, he saw what he could only describe as an infinite, shining ocean of pure consciousness, with these brilliant waves rushing toward him from all sides to just swallow him up. He was completely overwhelmed and fell unconscious. He said later that while the outside world was just gone, inside him was this steady, flowing current of pure, undiluted bliss, an experience totally unlike anything he had ever known. When he finally came to, the only word on his lips was mother. Now, you might think that's the end of the story, right? But that incredible earth-shattering vision wasn't an endpoint. In fact, it's the very reason the book we started with even exists. Yeah, that vision marked a radical new beginning. From that day on, Ramakrishna's life became this continuous flow between normal consciousness and these ecstatic states of bliss. It was this extraordinary existence that the schoolteacher M sat down to document, meticulously writing down every word, every story, every time he slipped into a trance. That diary is what became the Gospel, a direct attempt to chart a life lived in the wake of an infinite vision. Which leaves us with the central challenge of the entire book, and kind of a final thought for you. The Gospel exists because of an experience that defied expression, and so it forces us to ask, can a record of the unrecordable ever be complete? Or is it just a signpost, pointing toward a reality that words can only hint at, but never ever truly contain?